Hello, and welcome to a very special edition of Fault Lines. Today is Friday, September 12th, 2025, and this is our 500th episode. I'm Martha Miller, Deputy Executive Director of the National Security Institute. And for this milestone conversation, we're bringing back a familiar and favorite voice who built this podcast from the
I
very
don't know about
beginning.
favorite. I don't know about favorite.
Not favorite.
NSI
Not
founder
favorite.
and
No.
Executive Director Jamil Jaffer.
Woo
We're
woo.
also, of course, joined by our current team, Advisory Board member Lester Munson, Senior Fellow Morgan Vina, and Jessica Jones. So to reflect on, we're going to reflect on how Fault Lines was created, how it's grown, how national security has evolved since then, what changes are likely to define the next 20 years. So given that it's September 12th, and yesterday marked a very important and sad day in our nation's history that profoundly shaped American life and defined national security for a generation. We'll first look back on how 9/11 and the global war on terror reshaped U.S. national security, then turn forward and focus on the next challenges that are facing our policymakers today. Jamil, I'd like to start with you. Could you?
Why is it me? Why does I gotta start with me?
So we just would love to get your thoughts on 9/11, where things were then, where things evolved along the way. How did that reshape our foreign policy? And then I'd like to pivot to the time in which you launched this podcast.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, obviously, 9/11 was a massively traumatic event for our nation. Nearly 3,000 lives lost in just a course of less than an hour. Two massive buildings collapsed in New York. The Pentagon was hit by terrorists, and a group of brave Americans crashed a plane into a field in Pennsylvania in order to save what we believe was an attack on the U.S. Capitol and save the members of Congress and their staffs that were there, if not the White House. And so obviously a traumatic day in our history, but we've seen hugely traumatic events since then. Just in the last day or two, obviously the killing of Charlie Kirk at Utah Valley State is something that's gripped the nation and is deeply troubling. The kind of political violence we're seeing in this country, whether we go back to January 6th and the attack on the Capitol, or this week's killing of Charlie Kirk. And then, of course, our allies and friends have seen similar attacks as well. You saw what happened in Israel just 2 years ago on October 7th, where they suffered an attack that was on a population-adjusted basis, essentially 12 9/11s in a single day. And we see the counterterrorism actions that have taken place since then. The U.S. went around the globe and spent 20 years going after Al-Qaeda and then ISIS wherever we found them. And now we see Israel going after Hamas, Hezbollah, a group of other terrorist groups as well. And so, the scourge of terrorism has not left our friends or our allies, and hasn't left the United States. We have potentially domestic terrorists conducting attacks in the United States. We have foreign terrorists who want to come after our nation. We have nation states, Russia, China, Iran, North Korea, who hate America, who are allying with one another closer and closer. I mean, the idea that you would see North Korean troops in Ukraine, Iranian drones and Iranian generals on the ground in Ukraine on behalf of Russia is something you couldn't even have imagined, I think, just a few years ago, and yet here we are today. So as far as we are from 9/11 now, 20 plus years ago, the impact that it had on our national security and our foreign policy, and the lasting impact it's had on the world, I think remains relevant to this day. And I think in a lot of ways Americans have let our guard down, right? We tend to think that we're safer today. You hear a lot of politicians, Republicans and Democrats alike, say we need to focus here at home. We need to not worry about overseas. Other people can handle their problems over there. And the truth is, every time we've done that, whether we're talking about the peace dividend after the end of the Cold War, before World War II, after World War I, and after World War II, we have seen the results of that. America ends up less safe. Americans end up less safe. Americans get killed at home, and then we respond and we react. And that's a bad way to operate. We need to continue to lean forward and lead from the front, and be the strongest nation the world has ever seen, a friend to our allies and a foe to our enemies. Unfortunately, that's not a view that's popular today in American politics.
Lester, I would love to hear your reflections on 9/11. Where were you? How did the world change in your view, at that time? And I'd love to hear your additional thoughts, similar to what Jamil's just shared.
Yeah, that was actually very eloquent from Jamil, and I applaud him.
Hard to imagine.
I know. I was pleasantly surprised. It's great to have you back, Jamil. We should do this more often.
And no yelling. Morgan's shaking her head.
And you were speaking at a reasonable rate.
It did take us 30 minutes to begin recording with Jamil here, so I don't know if we can handle this three times a week.
We don't need to burden our listeners with that. There's a backstory, of course, but that was very good.
We were just trying to get the video and the audio right. That's all.
Can you move forward 1 inch? Back
1 inch.
Yeah.
Could you move your microphone closer? All right. 9/11, 24 years ago in a day, I was in the Dirksen Senate office building working for the Foreign Relations Committee, watching what happened like everyone else on TV after the first plane hit, trying to figure out what was going on. Obviously, deeply profound event, I think, for everyone in the country. Every American had a reaction to it. If you were like me in the Capitol, you felt like you were almost personally at risk. There were people on my block who were American Airlines pilots. We didn't know what happened to them. They ended up being fine, but it took a few hours to figure that out. My wife was in a plane flying to Chicago. Didn't know what was going to happen with her. It was a crazy day, beautiful Tuesday morning, blue skies, and the most horrible things are happening. It was as I think folks who lived through it all know in their hearts, it was a very, very difficult day, and the days that followed were not easy either. A lot of profound changes since then. By the way, my one connection, Todd Beamer, the hero of the plane that went down in Pennsylvania, the guy who said "let's roll," was a high school classmate of mine. We're on the same basketball team. He was a much better basketball player than I was.
Shocking.
And a very good athlete, a good guy, and not surprised at all by his behavior that day, which I think has inspired people to this day to do things that put themselves at risk for the greater good. So that resonates with me every single day, really, since then, and certainly on the anniversaries of 9/11. Deeply changed the way we approach the world, not necessarily for the better. We, in the last 25 years, last 24 years, have been a different situation in the world. We're in a much different place now. The threats to the U.S. are different. Things have changed. I'm not sure every decision we made in the last 24 years was the best one, but we were trying to deal with a very difficult situation around the globe with respect to terrorism and the threat it posed to our people and our friends and allies around the world. We muddled through in some cases. In some cases, there was some real heroism and people did amazing things. But we find ourselves in a different world today, and our government is taking a slightly different approach. I'm not exactly where Jamil is on some of these discrete questions, but his larger point is the correct one. The U.S. needs to lead. The U.S. needs to be to own up to its responsibilities in the world. It needs to put together the group of countries and others that will act in concert to defend civilization and freedom and individual liberties and the best of humanity, and not to be pulled down by dictatorships, authoritarianism, terrorism, the darker angels of our nature. We need to embrace the good and fight for it. That doesn't mean everything needs to lead to violence at all, and sometimes we need to choose the diplomatic route, and we need to take a longer term approach, but we need to be focused on our leadership role in the world. That is the ultimate lesson, I think, of the last 24 years. We cannot shy away from the things that are responsibilities in the world, and we need to live up to them.
So Morgan, obviously Jamil, Lester, and I are slightly older than you are.
Wow.
From your perspective, from your perspective, tell us about 9/11 from the perspective that you have from your generation. And, if you had to identify one major assumption that we believed prior to 9/11 and we treated as gospel that turned out to be wrong, what would that be?
Thanks, Martha. And I hope I can live up to the eloquence of both Jamil and Les. Well done, guys. It was really beautiful. I was a sophomore in high school on 9/11, and I lived in sort of an outer suburb of Washington, D.C. And at that time, my mom was a teacher at the school that I attended. And I remember seeing the second plane go into the World Trade Center. And I remember hearing about the plane going into the Pentagon, and we were all just sort of standing like, what does this mean? Now, of course, the issue for us is that we had a lot of students whose parents were in DC working on working in Capitol or working in the Pentagon. And there was just a lot of uncertainty about who's going to pick these kids up from school, and what does this mean for the community? Mm-hmm. And it wasn't until later in the evening where I was watching TV with my parents that I learned who Osama bin Laden was and who Al Qaeda was, and that, holy shit, there was a real and dangerous threat. There was a very real and present threat against the United States that, frankly, no one had really been tracking, and that we were all in danger this entire time. And this was a ticking time bomb waiting to erupt. And I think for us, there were so many people, so many of my classmates that wondered, are we safe? Yesterday I was sort of scrolling through social media, as one does. And I come across, Sesame Street, an old Sesame Street sort of clip. And it's about Elmo and how Elmo is scared post 9/11 and how to talk to your kids following this is the greatest tragedy that I think any of us will ever experience, that generations have experienced. And so for me, it was a real turning point that, wow, there are really bad guys out there that want to hurt us. And if we don't lead, if we are not the one, if we don't stand up and defend ourselves and defend our friends, no one else will, and the bad guys will win.
Mm-hmm. Jess, you're also in this younger generation. Could you share, where you were, what your impressions were, and again, what assumptions we had that were really kind of false hope at the time?
Yeah, I think I'm the only person that was on the West Coast during the attack. I was likewise, I was in high school. And so it was very early, but I happened to be up when the first plane struck. And then when I got home, I woke up my mom, we turned on the TV. But other than my dad was abroad in London, so he was delayed a few days. But for us, it's funny, I'm in out with my partner's family right now, who are all based on the East Coast. And like everyone else on 9/11, we were talking yesterday about where we were. All of their days stopped. If there were classes, school was done. If they were work, they went home. And I think on the West Coast, at least in my community, I had school all day. Like I went to class like normal. We pulled out that's the day where you still, rolled out the TVs, and every class we turned on our TV for that period. And we talked about it, and our teachers answered questions, but we all went to class to discuss it. And I think there was, at least for me, a somewhat disconnect because it wasn't as immediate, and somebody might know folks that worked in New York. And so there might've been some connection, but it was definitely not the same. And then I remember I went to college the next year, and I roomed with people who were from New York, right? Whose family, it was a much more direct impact. They talked about, like Morgan said, that, the cars still being the train station because they knew their parents weren't coming home, right? And that visceral feeling, I didn't have that. And so it was so eye-opening listening to these stories of people whose lives were really lost. And like, Jamil and Les said, just these traumatic, devastating moments. And like Morgan, I, spent yesterday, couldn't help it, looking, social media is now even LinkedIn, right? So you see these posts talking about folks where they were and their impact on their lives, their careers. And what worries me is, a lot of them talk about unity in the face of this disaster and Americans coming together. And of course we did. And, this outside threat that we could pinpoint, identify, go forth and attack. And what seems scary today, and Jamil touched on kind of the topic of political violence, is that so much of what worries me is internal, right? Our unity here in the country, how we can talk to each other, how we can't talk to each other, our colleagues, our neighbors, our friends, even family. And it's not an external threat. And so we can't just pinpoint it, go somewhere, send our military, right? That's not going to work. Hopefully that's not going to work. And so how we bridge that divide and unify in the moment of these really still devastating moments here in the US that are happening when we can't go somewhere. So that's what concerns me. And that 9/11 really brought that home yesterday, as you've got these kind of you have Charlie Kirk, the killing of him, and 9/11 just in real time, simultaneous almost. And the reactions that differ after those events are so different. Like you can't help but miss it, right? And so what that means for us moving forward, to me, is just such an open question that's so worrisome.
Well, I think that's a really important point. I think to me, what's so important about that is it's about leadership, right?
Yes.
And you look at what our political leaders said in the aftermath of Charlie Kirk's killing, and it was not what our political leaders said after 9/11. After 9/11, it was clear America was going to come together. We were going to figure it out together. We were going to go after that outside adversary. Today, our political leaders are saying it's the other side's fault.
It's actually
right?
worrisome. It makes us more scared about what comes next.
It's crazy. You have the president attacking the left, and you have the left saying, "Well, maybe Charlie Kirk deserved it." I mean, it is literally insanity. Yeah.
Can I disagree a little bit here? And I'm going to kind of.
I needed your optimism today, Les. Actually, I was thinking that you would bring it.
Be more optimistic. I think the president actually said one thing that was not great, and another thing that was much better. And you can choose to focus on which statement depending on your view, or maybe take them holistically. Governor Newsom, who's not exactly my favorite political figure, had a wonderful statement yesterday. So did J.D. Vance.
So did Bernie Sanders.
So did J.D.
Sanders.
Bernie Sanders.
Yes.
Right. So like one of the things that's different now is now, as opposed to 24 years ago, everyone has a voice and everyone can put something on Twitter, and you can also see things that you decide want to make you angry, or you can see things that you decide are going to resonate with you. So we need to kind of one of our responsibilities now is to kind of curate what we see and not overreact to the stuff that is too far on the other side. And so I actually think I've actually been encouraged by a lot of the stuff I have seen in the last 36 hours.
Well,
48 hours
from
people.
What did the president say that you thought was problematic, and then what was the part that you thought
like you highlighted, like going immediately to the political division in the country. And by the way, that's not wrong. It's just, I think, a mistake to focus on it. And instead, let's focus on the fact that political violence is indeed on both sides. There's no doubt about that. None of it is okay. None of it. Not a single bit of it. And I can stand here on my soapbox and talk about it all day long. But like the point here is we need to focus on the things that bring us together, that we have in common. All of the differences that we have inside our country are so slight and so insignificant in the grand scheme of things. I think both sides politically are trying to do the best thing for the country. We have two different views. That's actually healthy in a lot of ways. And we shouldn't all agree on every single thing. It is good to have disagreements, but we need to be able to talk about them and not think the other side is evil just because they disagree with us.
But Les, you're reasonable.
What's that?
You're reasonable. This is a reasonable position.
I know. Yeah, I'm very reasonable. Yes, I am.
Hey, by the way, we didn't get
reasonable one.
We didn't get Martha's. We didn't get Martha's view on 9/11. We got to get Martha's take on this too.
All right. So like Lester, I was working in the Senate, and I was in the Russell building, right across the street from the Capitol. As many of us can recall, those of us who worked on the Hill, there was a mad scramble that morning for someone who was coming in to see the senator. And I was so focused on getting my task done. I saw the one airplane on the TV screen. And I thought, oh, one of these private Cessnas, got off course. You hear these things all the time, right? So then I was like, oh, I need more coffee. So I went down to get coffee, and I remember standing in line and thinking that the second plane on the television was a replay, except that the owner of the coffee shop looked horrified and shocked. And I thought, didn't he see it already? So I just kind of went about my business, because I thought for sure that was a replay. Went up to my desk and kept doing my thing. And then the chief of staff came storming through the room. After, I guess we saw there was smoke at the Pentagon, and I was still kind of in denial. And he stormed through and he said, "Go home." And we all just kind of looked at him like he was crazy, because it was just like we were in a full level of disbelief, all of us. So finally, we all kind of reluctantly left, because I was, you're all kind of thinking like, I have this agenda for the day. So, yeah, it took I don't know, 2 hours to get to DuPont Circle by car. For anybody who lives in Washington, that's a very long time.
Walk it faster. Yeah.
You could walk it faster in hindsight. On the ride along there, it was a beautiful day. Windows were down in the car, stuck in traffic, and cab drivers were just kind of parked there on the side of the street, listening to the radio, and what is it, WTOP or someone was playing as the favorite of taxi drivers at the time. And there were reports about another plane coming to Washington. And then there was, some confusion about what was happening, about something about another plane coming for the mall. And, there we were, near the National Archives. And, just thinking and then I remember even thinking too, one of the pieces of my portfolio was our chemical weapons stockpile. And so I was kind of thinking, the metro could be faster, but I don't want to go down to the metro. What if there's an attack down there and it's already planned? So nonetheless, got to DuPont Circle, where I met up with my now husband, who was working at the National Security Council and also was evacuated from the old executive office building. And we just sat there and watched, and kind of disbelief and just, complete sadness as we watched the desperation of people who felt like it was better to jump out of the building than to be met with fire. And I think that was honestly, obviously on the human side, that was deeply jarring and disturbing to see that tragedy unfold in real time. The fact that people would bring this upon our fellow citizens, but then also the idea that, we had been so confident in our security as a nation. We had won the Cold War. It was, as to Jamil's point, we were experiencing the peace dividends, and everyone was in this kind of euphoric mode of oh, we've got the Silicon Valley, and, everything's bright and happy and optimistic. And there's what are we going to be policing in the world? So the complacency started in the 90s, and I just remember that feeling of vulnerability was the first time I ever felt like America was vulnerable. I guess almost like a Pearl Harbor kind of moment. Obviously I wasn't alive then, even though my kids probably think I was, but I can only imagine that that's how people felt when Pearl Harbor was struck. So it did actually make me want to work in the administration, where executive action is taken to actually do something, rather than being in the Senate, where you're essentially overseeing and opining.
Les, that's an attack on Congress. You better rebut that later.
That was mean. It was very mean.
But I think sadly, and there were a lot of tough decisions that President Bush had to make, obviously. Not all of it, no one's perfect. No administration is perfect. And there's a lot to discuss about that. But at the end of the day, what we did see succeed was no more terror attacks on American soil. And that you cannot argue with. obviously, while we were fighting this war on terror, I think President Putin and was up to something else. That kind of I think kind of under the radar, or maybe not under the radar, was kind of trying to start rebuilding what the Soviet Union or Russian Empire used to look like, and it actually started with Georgia in 2008, and and President Bush was actually pretty. People forget that back then, President Bush was actually pushing for Ukraine to join NATO. And it was rejected by NATO members. I think some of our European partners were uncomfortable with that. So I guess anyway, we probably, again, it's kind of like 9/11. In hindsight, I think we can see what was going on, what was unfolding, and what was building, but we didn't see it. Jamil, you've been very involved. You worked on the oversight committees for the intelligence community. I'd like to hear your thoughts about anticipating threats, and how did we, in a way, I feel like we sort of missed these big threats. Would love to hear your thoughts on that. Like, is it true that we miss these threats? I know there was a lot of work done to improve our intelligence gathering and the information sharing across our government. But I would just please share your thoughts on all of that.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think that we knew Al Qaeda was a threat. The President Clinton had tried to kill Osama bin Laden at one point after the embassy bombings in Kenya and Tanzania. So we knew they were a threat. Just like today, we know that Russia has designs on the rest of Eastern Europe. We know that China has designs on Taiwan. We know that Iran wants to continue to support terrorism throughout the Middle East, and we know North Korea has nuclear weapons because they want to threaten us. But we act like, oh, it's not that big a deal, whatever. We can do a deal with Russia. It'll be fine. Ukraine, just give them part of Ukraine. Everything will go great. Let's not worry about China. We can make a great trade deal with them, and we don't have to worry about Taiwan, whatever. Semiconductors be damned, right? North Korea, nuclear weapons. We can do a deal with Kim Jong-un. We can get a deal with him. And Iran, we'll take out some of their nuclear sites and it'll all be fine. I mean, it is literally criminal. The idea that we would look at these threats, see them for what they are, recognize that these countries are working together, partnering tightly with one another, and just be like, well, it'll all be fine. We should really just focus here at home and really concentrate on how much we hate the left or hate the right and how terrible these people are, and not worry about the rest of the world. Retreat back home, not make historic commitments to our national defense, not fundamentally change how we fund the military and our national security community. And by the way, take authorities off the table for the intelligence community and our defense partners, because God, it's just everything's fine. We're okay in the world, and nobody wants them to have these authorities. That is literally the position that most of our political leadership is in, both Democrats and Republicans, and it is insane. Don't be surprised when our adversaries come after us. It's always been coming. It's coming, and if you don't account for it, politicians, we were going to hold you accountable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, just to chime on to what Jamil just said, I think it's in a post 9/11 world, we need to focus not necessarily just on the strategic competition with Russia and China. No, it's terrorism and global war on terror, right? I don't think we can, I think it would be a mistake for us to say that terrorism is no longer a threat to the United States, right? We see these threats come in every single day, and thank God that they are neutralized before they actually hurt Americans, right? So I think we're very fortunate there. At the same time, though, we are seeing this multipolar world where you have Russia and China link arms and bring in all of the baddies, right? And the United States, as we've seen, is, in my personal view, not ready for that. I see it every day in my work, where we are just trying to work with the Department of Defense to get our warfighters the material, the equipment, the resources they need to combat our adversaries, and it is not enough, and it is certainly not fast enough.
Yeah,
please jump in.
Yeah, I was, when we, the prompt when we were kind of discussing what to talk today was like, okay, what do you think about the future? Russia, China, cyber, climate, what do you see as these big threats? And kind of going back to what I said earlier, I had read a book recently called The Underground Empire, which talks about kind of this almost accidental, invisible empire the US has through our kind of financial power and building the internet, telecom infrastructure that a lot of the world uses. So like the control over data, right? Data that flows through the US. And it's like this invisible power in addition to our military strength, right? But we don't see it. And what I think about in the future, what frightens me is regardless of adversary, whether it's these traditional nation states, whatever domain it is, it's the US is we're basically applauding the undermining of our own system and the system that has kept us prosperous and secure and the world relatively stable. And we know we talk about all these conflicts, Jamil just listed a ton, but relatively stable. We're literally applauding the weakening of our own systems and that have made us secure. I mean, it's crazy. We talk about, I don't know how many times we said the word tariff in the last year on this show, but we are undermining the dollar. We're basically, we're attacking even our allies that have buy into this system that we have created. Why shouldn't they use Huawei as their telecom infrastructure then? What are we doing if we're not a stable partner to our friends? We're also not going to be a stable enemy to our adversaries. I mean, President Trump met with Putin almost a month ago. What's happened since then? He's come down harder on Modi, a friend. Like we are just wavering here in the wind. And that actually is what worries me. Is it's not even what adversary do we need to face in what domain. It's how are we even going to be able to meet any of these challenges if we have a population if we have people that are applauding just the weakening of our own country.
Mm-hmm.
Look, I'll divert a little bit here, not a ton, but a little bit. We have made mistakes in the last 25 years in our response to challenges in the world. And politically, we need to account for those. And we need to build those into the way we address future threats. And it is not always, kinetic action is not always the answer. Sometimes it is. And we need to preserve that option. And I think the smartest thing we can do now is make sure, as Morgan was pointing out, that we're ready to do that when we need to do that. But it needs to be the choice of last resort every time. We were not quite in that space for the last 25 years. And I'm not going to be super critical about any specific decision. But at the end of the day, the American people are very reluctant to go to war, and they should be. And it should only be as a last resort. It should not be taken as a preventative measure or the first choice or even the second choice. It should always be the last choice. It is because it is once you unleash the hounds of hell, you don't know where things are going to go. And I'm fully confident that we have the best options possible, but that doesn't mean we're going to control the outcome. And terrible things can happen. So while we need to be ready to go at a moment's notice, and there are threats to us in the world, the idea that we respond kinetically or militarily to every single one of them as they pop up is wrong.
Yeah,
but we need to hold back.
But nobody's saying that, right? The question is, have we taken the military?
Here's the challenge, though, Jamil. The challenge is that you're right. No one is saying explicitly that, but when we talk about the role of the Senate, or we criticize, kind of populist reactions to things, and I'm as critical of that as anybody, I think, they come from an honest place. And we need to have moderation in the system, and we need to find a way to act across the spectrum in a way that people will support. Yes, leadership is important, but you also have to put leadership in a position where the American people will actually follow them. And in the last 25 years, we have made some decisions that were not ideal. And we need to recognize that. And we need to adjust, and we need to preserve our options to act when we need to act. That does not mean, we're going to go in militarily in every situation. Ukraine is terrible. Should the U.S. be providing air cover to the Ukrainians right now? I don't think so. Could that be in the offing if there's part of a peace deal? Yes. But I think so. I think one of the things that we need to do in the national security space is find more common ground, take the temperature down a little bit. We're not going to agree on every single thing, of course, but start to build across the aisle and with the extremes in both parties, frankly, with the folks who are a little more reasonable, the willingness to do the things we need to do when we actually have to do them.
Yeah, look, I just think it's a straw man to say, that we can't go after, we have to go after everything in every place, or that we have made some mistakes in 25 years. Of course, those are both true. Of course, we made mistakes in 25 years. Of course, we don't need to fight every battle around the world with the military. But the problem is today. the vast majority of politicians, and frankly, every president, including President Trump, including President Obama, and including President Biden, have taken the military instrument power off the table. They're unwilling to use it, except in rare circumstances, very occasionally. President Trump has been the most forward-leaning with the attacks on Qasem Soleimani, the nuclear sites in Iran, and now the alleged counter-drug strikes. But even those are only temporary. And you even see in the internal discussions that we saw with the Houthi strikes, right? Internally, J.D. Vance, the Vice President of the United States, saying, well, only if they pay us for it. I mean, it's ridiculous. Like, let's be serious, okay? And if you're not going to have the military instrument power available to you, then nobody's going to take you seriously. And what you're describing, Les, this idea that we do it, on occasion, of course, that is how America's always used her power. But our adversary has to believe that we will use it, that we can use it. And as Morgan said, if we don't pay forward and actually invest in our military now and give them capabilities, new and innovative capabilities, we will not be ready for that fight, not tomorrow, not the next day, not a year from now, and our adversaries will see that, and that, unfortunately, is the reality. The reason our adversaries are so aggressive against us today, whether they're terrorists or nation states, is because they don't believe America will use its power effectively, that we won't intervene, and that we will sit at home and whine about it, but not do anything effective.
First of all, I'm a little concerned at how much you're agreeing with what I just said. And yes, okay. we need to. Sorry, Martha. Let me just quickly respond. I'll try to be quick. We do need to be ready to act at a moment's notice, we totally agree on that, and we need to have the capability to do that. And at the end of the day, the most important decision Congress is making is the size of the defense budget, and it needs to be more robust. And we need to have more options open to policymakers, and people do need to fear us. That doesn't mean that we need to go as often as we have gone. It is okay to use pinprick strikes. I am not going to be critical of the decisions Trump has made on the use of force. I actually think they've been pretty
critical
smart.
of it.
And I think, the Obama administration actually made some good decisions. I don't agree with every single thing they did, but they actually made some good decisions on the use of force on occasion. President Obama was happy to use military force to take out terrorists. That is true. In fact, he's been criticized by the left for that, and good for him for doing some of those things. A lot of those things were exactly the right thing that we need to do. He made some tough decisions. He killed Osama bin Laden. George W. Bush did not. And maybe that's circumstances, but good for Obama for doing that. We learned a lot about Obama's vice president when he opposed that strike. That should have informed voting later, in my opinion. But here we are. But we also need to be good stewards of that, and I'm not sure that we always are. And we need to recognize that decision is the toughest decision there is, should be done as a last resort. The American people need to trust their policymakers that they are going to do that as a last resort. Then they will invest in them the authority to make that decision in the right way. And we're a little bit sideways with that right now. I hope we're getting to a better place.
But I think the problem is our adversaries have, I think, correctly assessed that the United States, that our political climate is such that presidents are afraid to use force. And that goes back to the Obama administration. Yes, was it fatigue from Iraq and Afghanistan? Of course it was. We can all be honest about that. Unfortunately, there was major fatigue. We had amazing unity right after 9/11, but I also remember being in motorcades. I remember the protests that took place. It was actually a quite contentious remainder of the Bush administration after that first year or two. Obviously, when Obama came in, I think it was, I'm gonna be the opposite of George W. Bush. That was just the beginning of this trend of doing everything differently and pulling back. That was started with the Obama administration. He had red lines that he never reacted to. Chemical weapons in Syria. Oh, that was a red line. Oh, America did nothing. The danger is also having red lines or deadlines and doing nothing to follow through. That's like parenting, it's in every parenting book. And if America is supposed to be leading in the world and we say all these things but don't actually follow through, No one believes this anymore. And, I applauded, the decision with regard to Iran this year. But like, what about the deadlines on Russia? We keep missing those deadlines. And Russia just keeps poking us and testing us. They're testing NATO. They're testing Washington in particular. Those drones over Poland this week, that was a test. Are we going to meet the test? What does that convey? I mean, Russia's been conducting a hybrid war against, Europe, on many different levels: cyber attacks, arson attacks, assassination attempts. They tried to assassinate the CEO of Rheinmetall, a major German defense manufacturer. They've had numerous arson attacks in Poland. And the Germans just seized a cargo ship just the other day where they found Russian spy drones in the canal in Kiel, Germany. So, in German waterways. So, not to mention, I really hate the terms disinformation and misinformation. What I do think is very active, and unfortunately, we provide the fodder for this, is malign influence. And what that is amplifying the divisions we have in this country, the divisions that exist in our allied, nations. And I think, yesterday and the way people reacted to it, it's a combination of social media and amplification, algorithms, and frankly, a choice being made by people to go down these rabbit holes as well. But adversaries manipulating our issues, our problems at home, are actually a pretty serious piece of the puzzle here, because in a democracy, you do need support for use of force. So anyway, I think I'm probably getting a little off topic now, perhaps, but
okay, you were just disagreeing with Les, so you could do that ad nauseum. And what I think is, I'm an Indiana Jones fan, and the Russians were always the bad guys. And who knew in 2025 the bad guys for another set of Indiana Jones movies could be the Russians, right? Like, it continues.
Oh wait, you're muted, Morgan.
So I know this has got to come to a close here, and we are already over time. But as we look to wrap up, one of the things that Jamil did on the 20th anniversary of 9/11 was have the NSI team contribute to this.
I had us do that. Let us.
Jessica.
Whoa! Don't you dare give credit to Jamil Jaffer on that one. That was some serious woman power that went into that.
Well, I have to say, this is perhaps one of the out of all the things that I've written for and had published, this is actually perhaps one of the most meaningful for me. I keep it on my bookshelf. It really is sort of the impetus for a lot of the work that I do, and it just really reminds me of the world that we live in and why we do the work we do. So with that, over to you, Martha.
On that note, I'd like to just, thank this crew. I think, just to echo what Morgan just said, I think what we've talked about today is really emblematic of the passion that goes into the work here at NSI, that we care about the future of our country, the future of the world. And yes, we actually encourage disagreements and debate, civil disagreement and debate.
We still like each other. I put like,
and we still like each other.
We still like each other.
Air quotes.
Air quotes.
But anyway, so I think it's just, it's also, I think we should celebrate, the fact that Jamil founded this organization, and, founded this podcast to encourage healthy debate and to help remind policymakers and Americans who, are listeners, that this is a very important mission.
For those of you that are not on video, you have to see Jessica and others cracking up as this is happening.
Well, I almost
so
like the podcast
the
is
nice
really a
ode
less
to
invention. I think he was.
Oh, was
These are
it?
podcasts.
Oh,
the
my
podcast.
bad.
Definitely the podcast. I fought the podcast.
Yeah,
I fought
Jamil
it.
fought
Oh,
it.
never mind. This was
That's
Lester's
why
baby
Les was
then.
really
I
cracking
apologize.
up there.
Well, we'll have to maybe
Thank you,
have,
Les.
to have our editors scrap that part. No.
We just had a crown ready for you on this episode, Les. And,
All right,
and nailed it
Lester,
to
you get the crown now. So
I'll take it.
Lester is our fearless leader on healthy debate on a podcast. And I guess prove Jamil wrong, apparently, is the actual story. But
It is.
But anyway, and thank you also to our fearless team. As always, to Kelly Crowley, Taylor Lane, Claude Jennings, and the entire NSI staff for the help producing today's episode, and also all of these 500 episodes. So join us on Monday, September 15th for another episode of Fault Lines, the National Security Institute's podcast to get you smart fast on the foreign policy debates shaking up America. And don't forget, we are on YouTube, so you can see all these funny reactions.
Whether some of us are closer to the camera or further away.
Yeah, you can
So
help us do our photo editing. And if you like what you heard or saw, please be sure to rate, review, and subscribe.
Thanks.